Nintendo, please, for the love of Frapes, make a Nintendo Switch Pro. The PS5 and Xbox Series X is finally out. And the third-party support for the Nintendo Switch is going down, and the PS5 and Xbox Series X are more powerful. So at this point, Nintendo really needs to make another Switch, not necessarily another Nintendo console generation, but like a Switch Pro. Like the PS4 Pro or the Xbox One X, something like that, to increase the lifespan of the Switch. So it's a more expensive version of the Switch with 4K graphics or something like that, like the PS4 Pro and the Xbox Series X. Both were $500, and it won't hurt for Nintendo to make a $400 Switch, just like the PS4 Pro and the Xbox One X. The third party is very important with game consoles. Nintendo relies a lot on their first party games with Mario, their Zelda, their Pokemon, all their franchises. It's good to have third party content for everybody to enjoy. There are people, there are Call of Duty, there are Batman Arkham. They need third party is important. Back when I was watching Nintendo Direct back in 2017, there were a bunch of games being ported on the Switch, and I was amazed. Like, there was South Park, Fractured Butthole, The Stick of Truth. There was Doom on the Switch. There was Skyrim. I was like, yes! The third party! Woo! Nintendo's doing better with the third party. Yes! With other consoles like the GameCube, Nintendo 64, and other consoles, the third party wasn't doing so good because they weren't as powerful as the PlayStation 2. Well, Nintendo 64 was more powerful than the PS1, but the only thing that the PS1 could do that the Nintendo 64 can do was full motion video. Some games managed to do that, like with South Park on Nintendo 64 and Resident Evil 2. There are some games that managed to have full motion videos on the Nintendo 64. Same thing with the Switch. There are games, third-party games on the PS4 that ran perfectly fine, and people enjoy playing them on the Switch. Like Doom on the Switch turned out really well. Doom Eternal did really well on the Switch. There were South Park games that did really well on the Switch. Well, there were 2D games. Skyrim did really well on the Switch. The Crash Bandicoot games did really well on the Switch. There was a Wolfenstein game on the Switch, and that did really well because there were PS4 and Xbox One games. The Nintendo Switch is a different kind of console, and yes, making an open world game and games on the PS4 and Xbox One is possible to work on the Switch. It is possible. There are more games, third-party games, that aren't doing so well, and people complain that the game runs like a slideshow, like Outer Worlds and Doom Eternal. Doom Eternal still played fine to other people, but it's just not the same game and not fun version of Doom Eternal, and Outer Worlds ran horribly. And the PS5, it's not that far off. There aren't any games to show the power of the console yet. I haven't played the new Demon's Souls for the PS5 yet. And Cyberpunk, by the time it's filming, is supposed to come out this weekend. And more games are being more massive. There are more advanced graphics, more photorealistic graphics, more everything. And it's about time for Nintendo to make a Switch Pro. The Nintendo Switch is mostly a 2D game console. So there's a bunch of indie games like Shovel Knight and Stardew Valley and other games. So the Switch is kind of like a people who likes retro-styled indie games. And games like the two South Park games. The games have the art style of the show. It's a 2D animated show, and the Switch can handle that. But with photorealistic graphics, the Switch can't handle it that well. If Nintendo wants to keep the third party around, it's about time to make a Switch Pro. Maybe some games will be ported on the Switch, like Cyberpunk or Grand Theft Auto 5. That game's still popular, Grand Theft Auto 5. That game came out in 2013. And if you try to play Grand Theft Auto 5 on an older Switch back in 2017 or a Switch Lite, it'll run like shit. It's about time to do a Switch Classic for $300, which is the original Switch back in 2017. The Switch Lite, which is handheld only, $200. And then with the Switch Pro, $500. So the Switch Pro will only be for the hardcore audience. Kind of like for average consumers, like they're just gonna get the Switch Slim, the Switch Lite, or the original Switch, while the hardcore audience, like YouTubers, will get the more expensive Switch. That's how it's gonna work. Same thing with the PS4 Pro and Xbox One X. It's mostly the hardcore audience that bought the more expensive stuff. If Nintendo can make 4K on a handheld, that will be awesome. Like close to the power of the PS4 Pro. That would be awesome to play for a 4K powered games on a handheld. I doubt they'll make a Switch a handheld powerful as the PS5. That's not possible. Like if you're playing it on the go and it's heating and it's burning your flesh off on your hands, that won't be good. Like maybe we'll have games like Assassin's Creed Origins or other later PS4 games on the Switch in the later half of the Switch's life. It might last, the Switch will probably live into the halfway through the PS5 and Xbox Series X generation. Which, if you think about it, how long the Switch will last, look how long the Game Boy lasted. It lasted from 89, then the Game Boy Color, which is, I don't consider it to be a new Nintendo handheld generation. They planned the Virtual Boy to be the replacement for the Game Boy, but that dropped. And some of Game Boy Colors are compatible with the original black and white Game Boy. So what I'm thinking here is that Nintendo, if you play Nintendo games made for the Nintendo Switch Pro, like Grand Theft Auto 5 or open world games, it'll run like shit in the original Nintendo Switch. That's what I'm thinking here. While other games will work fine on the original Switch during when the Nintendo Switch Pro is out. I doubt we will get another Breath of the Wild sequel anytime soon. Anything like Breath of the Wild. It's a massive game, and open world games take a while to make. Like, Breath of the Wild development took as long, close during the Wii U's life. And Cyberpunk 2077 been in development since 2012 during the Xbox 360 and PS3 generation. open world games take a lot of time to make, and I doubt Nintendo will make a Breath of the Wild sequel as like a little game, Switch Pro game. Which I think if Nintendo makes a Switch Pro sometime in 2021 or 2022, I think they're gonna have other games, more simple games, like that's been out for a little while, like Grand Theft Auto 5 or Cyberpunk, to support Nintendo Switch Pro. And with Metroid Prime 4, I would buy it being a Switch Pro game to help promote the Switch Pro. Metroid Prime 4 has been in development for a while. I don't know their progress making the game, but Nintendo had been really money thirsty lately for the past couple of years. Like, older Switch games like Breath of the Wild, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and other games are still $60. Like, there are ports of games in 2014, like Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. That's still $60 when it should be like $20. With South Park: The Stick of Truth, that game came out in 2014, and you're charging for $60? A TV show based game cost $60, and it came out in 2014. It still cost $60. Like, there are gamers that have multiple consoles that haven't played Stick of Truth yet and wants to play it. They're just gonna get it on Steam or from PSN store for $20. That's one thing Nintendo could improve with Nintendo Switch for the later half of the generation. Nintendo, make a Switch Pro. If the Switch is doing so well, it's about time for Nintendo to make a Switch Pro at this point. Because there are more people complaining about third-party Switch games coming, running horribly, and being glitchy. And it's about time for Nintendo, if they want the Switch to last longer, it's about time to make a Switch Pro. Like, they could do another Nintendo console generation. They could do that, but I'm not necessarily saying that. Just make a Switch Pro, like the PS4 Pro or the Xbox One X. It's about time for Nintendo to make a new Switch. Because the technology on the original Switch is getting more and more dated. It was dated when the Switch came out or was even announced in 2016. I'm not in deep technical stuff. I don't know what kind of chips and other stuff is inside the Switch, but I know it's dated and they need to make a more powerful Switch. That's all we're asking. Which there are some vague clues that Nintendo's probably making one. There are articles. I don't know what's going to happen, but something could happen in the next 2 years or a year or two.